pleased to introduce Tara Alderete, Director of Enterprise Learning at Money Management International, where she develops and manages education programs in person and online. So Tara, I turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeff. Happy New Year, everybody. I am really excited to be here with you. This is actually the first webinar I'm doing of the new year, and I'm happy that it's with you guys. So we are going to talk all about debt and keeping debt under control today. I'm going to try to make this as interactive as possible. So please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. Jeff is going to be monitoring those so that we can answer questions and just talk about different various topics. We're going to do a couple of different exercises in this course today. So if you haven't done this already, go ahead and grab a pen and a piece of paper. We're going to go old school with this. We'll give you a couple minutes to do that while I'm talking a little bit about our organization, but you'll want to have a pen and piece of paper handy. We're also going to have a couple QR codes throughout the presentation where you can link directly to places on our site. So again, we'll try to make this as interactive as possible. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen from the beginning here. All right. So again, my name is Tara Alderete. I'm the Director of Enterprise Learning here at Money Management International. And before we get started, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about what our organization does and how we might be able to help you. The reason I love to do this is because inevitably we start to talk about a financial wellness topic, whether it's creating a budget, getting out of debt, whatever the case may be. And folks are like, yeah, this is some pretty good information. And about 10 minutes in, they're like, how can I reach out to somebody and talk to them about my own individual situation, my own debt load, or my own budget? And so I want to make sure that I have the resources up front for you to be able to do that. So our organization is a nonprofit dedicated to helping improve lives through financial education. What we can do for you is work one-on-one. You can work one-on-one with a counselor at our organization to identify your income, your expenses, create a workable budget and an action plan that works for you. This is the best place to start. So if you're thinking, I want to take a look closer at my own personal finances, the first thing you would want to do is reach out to us. This QR code on screen is going to take you directly to begin an online counseling session, but you can also do that over the phone. This takes about an hour. If you have a spouse or significant other, bring them with you. And you'll go through your income, your expenses. You'll create a budget and an action plan. From there, our counselors will take a look at your credit report and your debt load and make recommendations. If it looks like you've got a lot of debt and it feels like it's overwhelming and this is a problem that is seeping into your other, areas of your financial life, they will suggest a debt management plan for you. And essentially, this is where we help you consolidate without a loan. We're going to go into detail in this course about what a debt management plan is, but I just kind of want to let you know what we can do to help you. If you do this initial session and you're like, you know what, my budget is solid, my finances are great, I don't need any more help, we're never going to call you or contact you again. It really is no catch cost or obligation, okay? But it is folks that are out there willing to help if you need it. We also do counseling in different areas as well. Runs the gamut. So if you're thinking about filing bankruptcy, we provide the education that you need to do that and get that bankruptcy discharged. We do housing counseling. We're a HUD intermediary. So if you need education to purchase a home and get down payment assistance, foreclosure prevention, eviction prevention, natural disaster counseling. If you are in a declared natural disaster zone, we can help you navigate through FEMA applications and things like that. So really anything that you might need for the foundational building blocks to have, strong financial wellness and foundation, we can help you with. So again, this QR code is going to take you to begin an online session. Our main website can be found at moneymanagement.org. And so I like to let you know who you're dealing with up front. So let's jump into the content. We have a lot of great stuff to cover today. So in short, we're going to take a look at the importance of determining your debt load. We do this for a couple of different reasons. One, to figure out how much debt you owe, but then also to calculate your debt to income ratio to see if you are in a place that's okay or sort of entering into the danger zone or like flashing warning signs. I need to do something about this today, right? We'll take a look at calculating that debt to income ratio and we'll do that together. We'll talk about assessing your own credit management skills, and then we'll also explore some options for dealing with debt. And so there's a bunch of different options for dealing with debt, and we'll talk about all of them so that you can choose the one that's right for you. And then we'll set priorities and create a debt management action plan that is workable. So before we do that, I like to take a look at some of these statistics because one, they're interesting, and two, I think a lot of times folks, if they are in debt, I know I've been in this situation, and you have a tendency to feel like it's just me. It's just me. I don't know what I'm doing. I spent all this money at Christmas and I'm a mess, right? But it is not just you. Jeff shared in the chat, I don't know if you had a chance to look at this, but this is really interesting. 36% of Americans were projected to go into debt this holiday season. So almost half, we're well over one quarter. And of those folks that went into debt this holiday season, it's projected that they would take on an additional almost $1,200 in debt just for holidays, right? And so when you think about that and add that to our already existing debt load, it's significant. And so some of the other statistics that I came across, these come from annuity.org. I thought this was riveting. 75% of American teenagers lack confidence in their knowledge of personal finance. This is huge because I think this says a lot about the conversations we are or are not having with our kids. And I think it also says a lot about sort of what's happening and where we're going, and then the importance of financial wellness. 25% of Americans say that they don't have anybody that they can ask for trusted financial guidance. So again, if this is you, you are not alone. Best place to start, reach out to us here at MMI. We can point you in the right direction if we don't have the answers for you, okay? 23% of US adults from 18 to 29 have credit card debt that's over 90 days past due. This is also staggering to me because the more past due you go, the worse your credit score gets. And we all know how much that credit score can affect every aspect of our financial life. And then finally, probably the number that is like mind-blowing the most, right? Americans owe over 1.03 trillion with a T in credit card debt as of the second quarter of 2023. They update these numbers a little bit later. And so I know that this number has gotten bigger, but when we think about what $1 trillion means, it's incredible. And that's just what we owe in America in debt. And so again, if you're feeling like I need to get my debt under control, but it's just me, it is not just you. And so we're going to talk about how to do that in this session today. Okay, so here's all these great things that we spend money on, right? And I think a lot of times the tendency is to say, you know, let me just swipe this credit card, no problem, I'll pay it off at the end of the month. We have the best intentions, right? We use our credit cards for a number of different things. So go ahead and put in the chat some of the different things that you use your credit card for or that you go into debt for. And we'll take a minute to sort of take a look at those and talk about those. So we talked about one big one was holiday shopping, right? I think other times folks will go into debt for vacations or luxury items. You know, and sometimes I think people get into debt and it's really through no fault of their own, right? Maybe it's medical debt or they have, you know, an issue in their life that was out of their control. They, you know, lost a job or had a reduction in pay or got sick or something like that. But for whatever the reason, I think as Americans, we find ourselves in situations of debt and it feels like it can be really overwhelming. We start by thinking about when we want to keep our debt under control, creating the right balance. And this really is striking a balance between what we need and what we want, right? So again, removing those situations that are outside of our control. It really is about creating a workable budget where we have a purpose for every dollar and identify discretionary income so that the goal is we're using our credit cards or we're going into debt for only what we can afford to pay in full every single month when that bill comes due. So with credit cards, we're not incurring interest or building debt that we have to pay on. And for other things like cars, mortgages, things like that, it's a very comfortable payment that's in our budget that still allows us to have savings and discretionary income so that we don't get into this, this situation. But if we're here, it's difficult to get out of to say, okay, I'm going to start fresh and do this wants needs. And so I say this to say, we're talking today about keeping debt under control, but really, I feel like financial wellness is a puzzle, right? When you're doing a puzzle, you have corners done first, and then you got to do the frame of the puzzle. And I feel like creating a budget is one of those corner pieces. It's the most important thing that you can do, and the first thing that you should do whenever you're thinking about financial wellness. And so it's a totally different topic for a totally different day. But again, if you don't have a workable budget, that is the first place to start. And you can reach out to us at MMI. We can help you do that. But you can't pay off debt. You can't control debt. You can't do any of that stuff if you don't know where your money is going. So it really is determining, what do I want? What do I need? Making this plan that's going to work for me, adjusting it every single month, and making sure that I'm saving on a regular basis for emergencies and also my goals, and that I have discretionary income set aside. So when something happens in life or I want to buy a luxury item, I don't have to go into unnecessary debt to do it. So the next thing that I wanted to just take a look at before we move forward is knowing your debt. And so we're going to go over some terms that we'll talk about throughout this webinar, but that you may hear just in different conversations when you're talking about debt. Please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat about these terms. I think a lot of times there's some confusion about when am I going to get hit with a late fee? What is the difference between, the due date and the statement date, things like that. So a creditor is somebody that you've borrowed money from that you owe back. And so this could be a bank, a financial institution, a credit card company. This is your creditor, right? APR stands for annual percentage rate. And this is the charge that somebody pays, you or me, the borrower, to the lender, basically for the privilege of being allowed to borrow that money, right? And so we talk about this percentage interest in terms of annual percentage rates. And so I think on average, the average APR on a credit card is somewhere around 23 to 29%, fairly high, right? That means that we're paying an annual percentage rate of 29% of what we borrow each year back to that creditor, which is why if we don't have to carry a balance, we don't want to. Current balance is the amount that you currently owe. And this is important because if we're talking about a credit card, this could be different from your statement balance, right? Your statement might cut on January 7th. And on that date, your balance might be $3,000. That's the number you're going to see on your statement. And that's what you need to maybe, pay to avoid interest. But if you go out on January 8th and you swipe your credit card for another $100, your current balance is then $3,100. So what I was saying is the difference between your current balance and your statement balance is that if you want to not get interest, you would pay that statement balance. You don't necessarily have to pay the current balance. When your statement comes due, you've got to pay the balance that's on that statement. Your due date is the date by which your payment needs to be made to avoid fees and other penalties. But this is important as well because if you don't make your payment on the due date, yes, you are going to get hit with a late fee, but you're not necessarily going to get negative credit reporting. So typically, creditors will report to credit bureaus at the end of each month. So on a 30-day cycle. So if you don't pay by your due date, let's say your due date is the 15th and you pay on the 16th, you might get a late fee, but you might not necessarily have bad credit reporting unless you don't pay by that next statement date. So that's important to recognize as well. There are sometimes grace periods in there where you may get a late fee, but no reporting. But then there are also sometimes grace periods where you'll have a due date. For example, my mortgage is due on the 1st. If I pay it anytime between the 1st and the 15th, I'm not going to get a late fee, right? If I pay it after the 15th, I'm going to get a late fee. If I pay it after the 30th, I'm going to get negative credit reporting. So that's important. And then the last term is your minimum payment. And this is the amount that you have to make to avoid any late fees and other penalties like negative credit reporting. This is also important because I think a lot of times folks will get into trouble because they pay less than this minimum, thinking if I pay anything at all, it's better than nothing. And that's not always the case. So if your minimum payment is $25 and you can only afford to pay $20 and you just pay $20 and you don't reach out to the creditor to get on some kind of a plan, you're going to go past due and you're going to have negative credit reporting. So that's also really important to identify. Next screen, please. So the next thing that we would want to do is work on determining our debt load so that we can get an idea of our debt to income ratio. And this is where you may not be prepared to be able to do this today, but we're going to walk through this exercise. And if you are, let's go ahead and do it. But if not, you can sort of do this in your head and identify or estimate what you think your balances are so that you can get an idea of your debt to income ratio. So we'll start to do that now. When you're determining your debt load, the first thing that you'll want to do is list out all your different creditors, right? So the name of the folks that you owe, the account number with them, and then the annual percentage rate. This is important for a couple of reasons. One, it's important to have all of your debts listed so that you know what you're dealing with. I think a lot of times folks will say, yeah, I have debt. How much? I'm not quite sure. Who do I owe? Let me think about this, right? We should know this information. So you'll want to list that out. And then if you choose to try to pay off debt on your own, there's a couple different ways you can do that. And so you would need to know your annual percentage rate and your minimum payment to be able to determine what method you want to choose. Then next to each creditor, you want to identify your current balance, how much you currently owe, what your minimum monthly payment is to that creditor, and then the due date each month. So you've got all of your information listed out. Then you want to add up all of your current balances and get a total debt number that you owe. In this example, we see that we owe a total of $15,000. And then you want to add up all minimum payment amounts and get a total minimum payment that you owe. In this example, we owe $300 at minimum to pay off this $15,000 debt.
When you're
Next.
paying only the minimum, does the current balance only go down a microscopic amount?
I love you for asking this question. Yes. So we're going to talk about this in more detail, but one of the things that's important to recognize is that if your minimum payment on this $15,000 debt is $300, and particularly when we're talking about unsecured debt like credit cards, you might pay that $300 every single month, and it's going to take you close to 30 years to pay off that $15,000. And not only will it take you close to 30 years, but you'll have paid probably close to, $28,000 to pay off that $15,000 because of compound interest. So yes, you're going to see that. On your credit card statements, you should see a disclaimer every month that says, if you pay only the minimum amount, it's going to take you X amount of years. It's usually 28 to 29, and you'll end up paying this much over time. But if you pay, let's say 350 instead of 300, you can be paid out of debt in 3 years and you'll only pay a total of this. You'll see this on every one of your credit card statements. So pay close attention to it. Thank you so much for asking that question, Jeff. Next slide, please. So we want to take a look at these numbers, these $15,000 and $300 total debt and monthly minimum, because it's helpful in calculating our debt to income ratio. So again, I realize that you might not be prepared today to do that to the penny, but I think all of us can sort of estimate how much debt we have. And I could think and say, oh, this is about what I pay each month, right? So go ahead and get those numbers in your head and sort of jot it down on a piece of paper, and we can walk through calculating your debt to income ratio. While you're doing that, I'm just going to go through the formula and then we'll do this together. So essentially, there are guidelines for your debt to income ratio and what that should be. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take your total monthly minimum payments. In our example, it was $300, right? You're going to divide that by your take-home income for 1 month. And so in the example that we talked about here, let's say my take-home income is $3,000. You can identify what your take-home income is. But again, this is after taxes. You're going to multiply that number by 100, and that's going to give you a percentage. And this percentage is your debt to income ratio. And so I'll give you just a minute to sort of think about what those numbers might be and jot that down. All right. So everybody should now have a percentage, right? And so if you are under 15%, you can rest easy, right? This is better than the average. This means you're doing a great job. Your debt is under control based on the amount of income that you have. You should be best positioned to be able to pay this debt off with no problem. If your debt to income ratio is between 15 and 20%, you are approaching sort of the danger zone, right? So you might want to start to think about a plan to get out of debt. You definitely want to not take on any more debt and really start to take a close look at that budget and think about, okay, how can I reduce this debt? If your debt to income ratio is over 20%, this means that you need to do something about this immediately, right? This is going to cause you to have all kinds of other problems in your financial life, because what happens is our interest starts to accumulate, late fees pile up, we're in over our heads, and it becomes a downward spiral of debt. And it affects every aspect of our financial life. And you know that if you've ever been in this situation, not only does it affect every aspect of your financial life, but it bleeds over into the other areas of your life as well. It's very stressful. So if your debt to income ratio is over 20%, I would say give us a call or go online after this webinar, talk to a counselor, see what we can do to get you out of debt. There is a solution. Next slide, please. So we all sort of have these debt to income ratio numbers in our head now, right? And I want to do another exercise. And this sort of goes through what we know about managing credit and debt, because I think these things go hand in hand. I think a lot of times this is a topic that we should be talking about from the time we're this big, but we don't. And so we get ourselves into debt. We get ourselves into a situation where we don't have a workable budget. And then we say, you know what, I really need to do this, and I have no idea where to start. And so this exercise gives us a good idea of, whether we should reach out immediately or how much we know about managing our debt. So I'd like you to grab your pen and piece of paper. I'm going to go through each of these questions, 1 through 15, and I would like you to answer these questions yes or no. And so what I want you to jot down is just like the number 1, and then whether your answer is a Y or an N, 2, Y or N, and then we'll sort of go from there. So number 1, are you borrowing money or using credit cards to pay for items that you formerly purchased with cash? So you used to be able to buy them with cash, but now you have to use credit to buy these things. Might be groceries, might be stuff like that. Number 2, is more than 20% of your net income, what you take home after taxes and fees, going to pay debts? And this would exclude your mortgage payment. Number 3, are you paying bills with money intended for something else? So maybe you set this money aside for, gifts or things like that, but you're saying, oh my gosh, my bills are higher than I thought. I need to use this to pay for those. 4, are you dipping into your savings to pay your current monthly bills? 5, if you or your significant other lost a job, do you have less than 3 months take-home pay in a savings account that you can access? 6, can you usually make only the minimum payment on your credit cards? 7, are you extending repayment schedules? Meaning, are you paying bills 60 or 90 days late that you once paid in 30 days, right? So I used to be able to pay my credit card bill in full every single month when I got it, but now it's taken me 3 or 4 months to pay that debt off. 8, are you near, at, or over the limit on your credit cards? 9, do you take out a new loan before the old one is paid off? Or do you take out a new one to pay off an existing one, right? So I don't know how I'm going to pay this current loan. Let me just take out a new loan to move it all over.
For the question about the number 8, would that be, say, near the limit? Would that be maybe 75% or something like
I'd
that?
say yes. I'd say 75 to 80% or higher. Yes. Number 10, are you unsure of how much debt you owe? within $50. I mean, I think all of us can't, identify it down to the penny, but 11, do you habitually pay your bills late? 12, do you charge more each month than you make in payments? So you're charging $100, but you're only paying a minimum of 50. 13, do you use a cash advance on one credit card to make payments on other credit cards? 14, has a collection agency called you recently or reached out to you recently about a past due bill? And 15, are you threatened with repossession of your car, cancellation of your credit cards, or other legal actions? So now we should all have on our paper sort of 1 through 15 and then Y or N next to each number. And then if we could move to the next screen, we'll take a look at what these things mean. So if you didn't answer no to any of these questions, right? So, or I'm sorry, if you didn't answer yes, sorry. So all of the questions have, all of the numbers have a no or an N next to them. You don't need any help at all. You are in great shape. Your debt is under control. You can clearly manage this on your own. Most of us do not fall into this category. If you answered yes to any of the questions through 1 through 10, if you have a Y next to 1 through 10, any of them, you might need to seek some help with creating a budget, right? And again, we can help you do that, but just create that budget, make sure you have a purpose for every dollar and you're keeping this under control. If you answered yes to any of the questions, 11 through 15, any of them, you should seek credit counseling immediately. If creditors are calling you, if you're borrowing from one to pay another, things like that, these are big red flags to say, hey, you're really, really getting into some serious situations here where you could be at risk of foreclosure on your home or losing your car, things like that. Nobody wants these types of actions. So you might want to reach out immediately and get somebody to help you out. Next slide, please.
What can we say to people that are too embarrassed or afraid to ask for help?
I will tell you that you are completely not alone. We do a podcast, Jeff. It's called Long Story Short. You should check it out. So what we do is we talk to people that have been in debt and they have paid out tremendous amounts of money to pay off their debts. It's amazing. They're our clients and we interview them and they talk about how they got into debt, what they did to pay it off. And what we hear is people get into debt for the same reasons as we do, right? Like, I lost my job. I didn't lose my job. I just had to buy stuff, right? Like, all kinds of stuff happens. I live my life the way I normally have, but groceries are 3 times the normal amount right now. People share their stories. And so I think things like this go a long, long way. And even webinars like this, and sort of breaking down that stigma and realizing that you are not alone. Don't be embarrassed, right? Reach out. Our counseling sessions are completely confidential. They're one-on-one. We're state regulated in every state where we operate, all 50 of them. We're not going to share this information with anybody. So anything you can do to sort of break that stigma and reach out, do it. But I think these conversations go a long way. Thanks for asking that. So there are several different options to manage debt, right? And so we're going to go through each of these in detail, but right now I just sort of want to go through them quickly. The first is to gain control on your own. And if you're going to do that, the best things to do are definitely avoid taking on any new debt, develop a really solid budget or spending plan where you have a purpose for every dollar and you know how you're going to pay off this debt, and then contact your creditors. See if they can lower your interest rate. See if there's anything they can do to sort of help you out in this endeavor. A lot of times they'll say yes. The next option you have for managing debt, and by the way, these sort of go in order. I think a lot of times people will say, hey, I'm in debt, I'm just going to file bankruptcy. Before you file bankruptcy, there are some other steps that you should consider. I think about this like a staircase, right? And the first step would be, can I gain control on my own? No, then I might need to go to the second step. Maybe I'm going to reach out to credit counseling and think about a debt management plan. So credit counseling is what we do here at MMI. This is folks that can provide guidance and support and help make payments more manageable. We can do this through a debt management plan. I'm going to talk about what that is in just a minute. The next thing you might want to consider is debt consolidation. So this might be where you get a different loan to pay off your existing debt, but you roll them all into one. So maybe I have 5 different credit cards, but I get a loan from my financial institution at a good interest rate, and I can use that loan to put all my credit card debt into one monthly payment and pay that. I think a
That
risk
may not be available to people with poor credit,
It
however.
may not. And the other risk you run there is if it is available to you, you still have those credit card lines open. So if you're not really good at sort of self-control, and some of us are not, then you could get into a situation where you've rolled all that debt into a new loan, but now you've charged those credit cards up again and you have double the debt, right? So not only might it not be an option, but it also might not be a great idea if you aren't really committed to doing this. Next slide, please. The next step would be debt negotiation or settlement. And this is typically where you would work with your creditor to say, okay, I owe $1,000. I can pay 700 of that. And when I do, this debt is going to be paid in full, right? This would be settlement. Couple things you want to know about that. One is typically if your creditor is writing off $600 or more, you've got to pay taxes on that. It's considered income. Sometimes, settlement can negatively affect your credit report. And so you just want to make sure you're asking these questions. How is this going to affect me? Can I get in writing that this is paid in full or settled in full? Things like that. But know that there are some sort of cons or downsides to that. The next step would be bankruptcy. There's 2 different options here. Chapter 7 would be liquidation of all your assets. And so they would take into consideration, cars, homes, things like that. But at the end of a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, your debts would be gone. Then Chapter 13 is this essentially adjustment of your debts, where they would pretty much do close to what we do on a debt management plan, right? They might say, here's all the debts you owe. We're going to sort of help you consolidate these. Here's your payment. So you are going to pay these debts off over time, but you do it in a more workable way. And then there are things like credit repair clinics, right? And so these are credit repair clinics. It's also like we're going to fix your credit, clean your credit. You want to be careful of these things. There are some really reputable organizations out there doing stuff like this for consumers, but there are a lot of unreputable organizations, scammers, right? Rule of thumb is anytime somebody is charging you money and they're saying, hey, pay me $100, I'm going to clean your credit, you want to be careful. Essentially, what they're probably going to do is just dispute everything on your credit report, hope for the best, right? They could be going through looking for some outdated information, but essentially they're going to work on a dispute process. This is something you can do for free by yourself. We can help you out with it, but you want to be careful of things like this. So there's sort of the steps in managing your debt. Next slide, please.
Yeah. So for the
What-
first two, um, do these affect your credit report or your ability to get credit going
Yes,
forward? Yeah.
yes. So you want to make sure you're asking those questions. And like I said, I think of this like a staircase, right? First step would be, can I do this on my own? No? Okay. Next, I'm going to reach out to a organization like MMI and see what they can do to help me, right? Next, I'm going to go here. Once we get to the settlement and things like that, yes, you are going to start to see negative credit reporting, and you want to ask, like, how is this going to affect my credit report? Can you send me this in writing? Because if they tell you, hey, this is going to have no impact, get it in writing. And then if there is an impact, it's very easy to dispute that and have it taken off. You've got it in writing, okay? So the next thing I want to do is take a closer look at what a debt management plan is. Jeff, are you able to play this video?
Uh, why don't I exit and let you,
Share
uh,
and do it?
yeah,
Share.
unless you have a link that I can, here, let me stop my share.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about what a debt management plan is. I have a great video here, and you can scan the QR code on screen, and it's going to take you to it's going to take you out to our site, and there's this video here about debt management plans. But I'm going to let you listen because they do a much better job.
If your credit card debt has you feeling stuck or overwhelmed, that no matter how much you struggle, you keep going nowhere, there's a debt repayment option that may be perfect for you. A debt management plan from Money Management International is consolidation without a loan. It's a great way to repay debt while reducing stress and saving money in the process. Here's how it works. We start by reviewing your finances in order to fully understand your unique situation. All of your credit card debts are then consolidated into a single estimated payment that you can afford. We work directly with your creditors to verify that this new monthly payment works for them. You simply make that single payment every month, and we handle the rest. Best of all, most credit card accounts included on a debt management plan are eligible for an interest rate reduction, which can save you an enormous amount of money over the life of the program. Because a debt management plan is not a loan, there are no credit requirements to start. It's also not a debt settlement. Your creditors receive payment every month, and at the end of your plan, your accounts have been paid in full. Sometimes life throws a curveball. If your situation changes and you find that a debt management plan is no longer right for you, you can cancel at any time. That's flexibility you won't get from a loan or a settlement plan. If you're ready to stop losing sleep worrying about credit card debt, sign up for your free counseling session today and find out if a debt management plan from Money Management International is right for you. Click Get Started to begin today.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and give this back to Jeff, but a really good, concise, professional explanation of a debt management plan. Essentially, what we're doing on these plans is consolidating without a loan. We will contact your creditors. Typically, we can get interest rates lowered to about 7%, which is crazy because it allows you to pay off your debt in less than 5 years. We take a look at a side-by-side comparison here of, folks that go this on their own and then choose a debt management plan. And for example, what we see is if we're starting with a little over $21,000 in debt, the average interest rate we see is about 27%. Again, we can work with creditors before we even start this plan, get your interest rate down to about 7% on average, which is where your savings and that condensed amount of time to pay this debt off comes from. We see about do it on your own plan, about 1% of the payment is going toward the principal plus interest. On a debt management plan, you're paying about $453 on this example, right? So you're paying typically a little bit less. And this includes a $25 fee. I'll talk about that in a minute. Time to pay off, this is staggering. On a regular plan, it's about 351 months, well over 20 years, right? On a debt management plan, we're seeing less than 5 years on average it takes people to pay off their debt. We don't have any debt management plans that currently go over 5 years, so you will be paid out of debt in 5 years. Interest, we see on a $21,000 loan, if you pay this at 27%, you're going to end up paying about $47,000 in interest on that loan. That's crazy. That is double what you owe, right? Just in interest. On a debt management plan, you'll pay a total of about $3,000 in interest on a $21,000 loan because we're getting that down to 7% from an average of 27. Then we take a look at a comparison of fees. Of course, if you do debt repayment on your own, there is no debt management plan fee. If you choose debt payment with MMI or another organization, you could potentially pay a monthly fee for a total of about $1,200 altogether. Let me tell you how this works. We do typically charge a fee for debt management plans because we have to pay a plan administrator that works for MMI. These fees are capped in every state. So you can see here that they're capped at $59 and $75. So we charge an initial fee to set up your plan and then a monthly fee. By law, these fees cannot be higher than $75 a month. But before we put you on a debt management plan, we're going to do that assessment of your budget. And we're not going to charge you anything that you can't afford to pay. Because of that, we've got clients on debt management plans that pay nothing. We've got clients that pay, the $75, but on average, our clients pay about $24 a month, right? So that being said, the average amount that it's going to cost you on a plan is about $1,200. And then we take a look at the comparison total cost. This is a big deal, right? So if you pay this debt off on your own, $21,000, I'm rounding, but $21,000, when all is said and done at 27% interest, you'll have paid $68,000 to pay off this original $21,000 loan. If you choose a debt management plan, you'll have paid a total of about $26,000 to pay off that original debt of $21,000. So we can see significant savings here. But I like to go into detail about these plans because a lot of times people look at this and they say, wait a second, that sounds way too good to be true. How does this work? That's how this works, okay? Another question that we commonly get, I'm just going to answer it up front, is this going to hurt my credit? And so typically what we see with a debt management plan, if there's one catch at all, it's that your credit accounts that you include on a plan are going to be closed, right? You can't pay off debt if you're accruing new debt. That being said, if you have like one credit card that you want to leave off the plan, you can do that. You can choose which debts are included on this plan, but know that the accounts that you include are going to be closed. There are times when we might see somebody enter into a plan and initially their credit score goes down just a little bit. The reason that happens is because they're closing accounts, right? And when we take a look at the factors that make up a credit score, available credit is one of them. And if you reduce the amount of available credit you have, you might initially take a small hit. But what we see over time is that folks on a debt management plan, when they get to the end at this 4 years or whatever, we typically see about a 94-point increase in people's credit scores because they're paying off their debt on time, they're paying it off in full. All those things work together to help them increase their credit score over time. So it is a good thing. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to take just a brief minute and talk about some of these alternatives to traditional credit that we see. I'm going to be honest with you and tell you up front before we start to talk about these things. These things are all things that I would run fast away from, right? So it's like your mom always said to you, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And that's the case with all of these things. When we're talking about things like payday loans, right? Like, we're going to go ahead and give you an advance on your paycheck. And when your paycheck comes, you just give it to us. Scary. They're going to typically charge you a very, very, very high interest rate, one that you're never going to be able to pay, and you're going to end up losing money. Check cashing businesses, right? This is where, you could write a check for money that you don't have yet, and they'll sort of hold that check. They're going to charge you big time fees to do this. Title loan stores. This is where you would give the title to your car and say, okay, I'm giving you this title as collateral for this loan. But what they don't tell you is that the interest rate on this loan might be 200-300%. You're never going to be able to pay this off. You're essentially going to lose your car. Advanced fee loans, credit cards, things like this aren't necessarily predatory lending strategies, but they can get you into a lot of trouble if you're incurring more debt than you can comfortably pay off. Subprime mortgage lenders. These are mortgage lenders that say, hey, your credit score isn't necessarily where it needs to be to get a traditional mortgage, but we could still help you. This would be a subprime lender. They're going to charge very, very high interest rates and fees. Rent to own, these are things like errands and stuff like that. You could rent your furniture, make payments and own it. What you want to look at over time, though, is how much you're paying for that piece of furniture or whatever it is over time. Usually the fees are very high and you'll end up paying, let's say it's a $300 desk, but you do rent to own, you'll end up paying about, $1,400-1,500 for that desk because you're making small payments over time. Pawn shops, tax refund lenders, and then overdraft agreements. So things like this, you just want to be careful of because it sounds good. It sounds like, oh, you can charge over your limit, no problem, but the interest rate is typically higher. So you always want to look at the big picture. How much is this going to cost overall? What are the potential problems I'm facing? What is the interest rate? And be aware that most of these things are things that you want to stay away from. there are alternatives to these, right? You can go ahead and put these in the chat. If you've got some good alternatives to these, you need to borrow money. The first thing I would do is say, reach out to your bank or financial institution, your credit union or your bank, and say, hey, what loan products do you have available for me? You already have a relationship with them. Chances are they're going to be able to give you a loan at a reputable repayment, strategy. Can you borrow from family or friends? Can you consolidate? Can you reach out to an organization like MMI and think about a debt management plan? There are alternatives. If you're thinking about credit, one of the sites that I love is Bankrate. It's Bankrate. Actually, let me go ahead and put this in the chat. This is a fantastic site where you can compare products. Let's say you wanted to get a low interest rate credit card to consolidate. You can compare these different products and find the one that works for you. So there are alternatives to these easy credit situations. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to touch briefly on student loans. This may or may not be something that is applicable to you, but essentially student loans are a little bit different because if it's a federal student loan, these are one of the things that we're not able to include on a debt management plan, and repayment strategies are different. If you do have student loans, let me go ahead and put this in the chat. It's student loans. This is going to help you. So you can go here, you can consolidate, you can use payment calculators, you can do things like that. There are organizations that do student loan counseling. We can help you find one of those if you need to as well. Next slide, please. And then before we wrap up and take some questions, I just wanted to talk a little bit about starting over, because I think a lot of times, oh, actually, we're gonna do one more thing. I think a lot of times you get into a situation where it's like, I've gotten myself out of credit problems, but now I have a low credit score. I can't get credit. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. How do I restart? We restart the same way that we started in the beginning, right? Being aware that you might have to make a large down payment for certain things. Be prepared to pay a higher interest rate for things, but know that you can always refinance, right? Once your credit gets better, you can refinance. Consider a cosigner and authorized user. There's a couple disclaimers I want to give you here. Be aware that as a cosigner, or if you have a cosigner, you are equally responsible for that debt, which means you don't want to become a cosigner and authorized user on somebody's account that they don't have good credit. This is not going to help you. If you become a cosigner for someone, realize that you are legally responsible to pay off that debt as well. You can have yourself added as an authorized user on somebody's account. Again, you want to make sure this is somebody that has good credit so that it helps you. As an authorized user, you are not legally responsible for paying off that debt or repaying that debt, but you can incur debt, right? You might consider using collateral to strengthen a loan request, right? Like I would like to borrow money for something, and you can use my house as collateral, right? You might apply for a secured credit card. Again, you can go to bankrate.com and compare secured credit card products. And then again, reach out to your bank or financial institution and ask for credit building products. Typically, they will have things that they call credit building products, and they can help you start from the very beginning or start over after problems. Next slide, please. So this is the last thing that I wanted to go over, and this is getting out of debt on your own, because I think for many of us, it's just as simple as this, right? And so you may have heard about strategies called the avalanche or snowball method. And so we're going to take a look quickly at what those are. So if you don't want to reach out to MMI, you don't want to do consolidation, anything like that, you can, I can pay this off by myself. Here's how you do it. First thing you want to do is make a list of all your debts. We talked about that at the beginning of this session. Then you want to say, what's going to work best for me? There's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever's going to give you momentum to keep on going. You can either choose to pay your debt off by interest rate or balance, right? Some people say, I want to pay off the lowest balance first, because as I see those debts get paid off, it gives me momentum. Or I want to start with the highest interest rate first, because I just can't stomach paying those interest rates if I don't have to. Choose whatever's best for you. Evaluate, make progress, and make adjustments as needed. reach out to your creditors first and say, hey, can you lower my interest rate so that I can start from a better place? Worst thing they can say is no. And if you get stuck in the middle of this, reach out to us to help you. Next slide, please. So essentially the way this works is you're going to list your debts in order. What we see here is the strategy to go paying off balances first, right? So I'm going to list all my debts. I've got my bank card, my department store, my ABC appliance card. You see all the information related to these, right? The idea here is I've got everything listed. I go back to my budget and I say, where can I cut out non-necessity items so that I can pay as much as possible to reduce this balance as quickly as I possibly can. I come up with, I can pay $155. That's what my budget allows me to do. Here's the hard part. Human nature says, oh, I paid off my bank card. I see that my minimum payment on this was $100. Now I have $100 every month to play with. No, we want to squash that urge and say we're going to pay $155 every single month until all of our debts are wiped out. So you're budgeting that $155. You're going to list all of your minimum payments, right? You're going to make the minimum payments to everything on the list, except for you're going to make a higher payment to that first account, right? So once that first card is paid off, you're going to take that $100 minimum payment and roll it into the minimum payment for the second one. So now instead of paying $23 a month on your department store card, you're paying $123 a month. Think about how fast that's going to get paid off. Once that's paid off, you're going to take that $123 and add it to the $32 for your appliance store card. So now you're paying the total $155 every single month on that account. That's how you're going to get out of debt quickly. Next slide, please. This is the same sort of principle, except for it's applied to a different example. In this example, we're paying off the accounts with the highest interest rate first, because again, I just can't see why I would pay a higher interest rate if I don't have to. Let me knock those out. And so same, we're going to take this $155, but the difference is we're going to pay off this appliance store card first because it's got the highest interest rate. So we're going to, make the minimum payment to other debts listed, but make the highest payment to the appliance store. Once that's done, we're going to roll that payment amount into the $23 for the department store, paying $123. Then once that's done, we're going to roll that $123 into the final account that we have, which would be the bank card, paying all of the $155. These are the avalanche and snowball methods that you hear talked about, and this is how you can get out of debt on your own. But again, the key points to remember here are going back to your budget, saying, okay, where can I cut even temporarily so I can pay as much as possible toward paying off this debt. And then once you have that number, you want to stick to that number until all your debts are paid off. Once you have one account paid off, keep paying the same amount. Don't say, oh, I have room to move. Not yet, right? The other big thing is here, you don't want to incur new debt while you're paying off any existing debt. And you really want to be committed to the plan, and it'll work. Next slide, please. So that's it. Here's the summary of all the things that we talked about. A lot. We covered a lot today. And so I'm going to shut my mouth right now and answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. So say you have negotiated with your creditor and you're going to pay, and they agree to accept 25% of whatever your debt was. Does that affect your taxes? Like, do they consider the excused amount income?
Yes. Anything over $599 is considered taxable income. Yes. And so you will receive, I think it's a 1099-C. You will receive a tax form for that. It is considered taxable income. So yes, you'll want to make sure you ask that question. But again, anything over $599 is going to affect your tax burden.
Yeah. Well, feel free, everyone, if you want to type a question into the chat. And is Money Management International in every state?
We are in every state. And what I've done here is I've shared a couple of different resources. So moneymanagement.org is going to take you directly to our main page From there, you can learn about the different services that we offer. You can do a whole bunch of different things. You can connect with counselors, all those things. Start your session today. And then we do also have an online learning platform that I shared. This is available at learn.mmiuniversity.org. You would register for this. The reason we ask you to register and create a password is that you can essentially load budgets and information into this. This is a tool where you can read articles, watch videos, connect with counselors, basically increase financial wellness on your own with this tool. And so please feel free to take advantage of these and share them. And again, if you don't take away anything from this session today, please take away the importance of reaching out and just talking to a third party to help you take a look at your budget and your plans. A lot of times, even if things are going okay, but you're thinking, I might be able to do something a little bit different, a third party that is not connected to your situation can see things that you might miss. And so it doesn't hurt anything. It's an hour's worth of your time. Bring your significant other, do it together, start the new year by this activity. And it will just give you a good idea. Say, hey, you know what? I am on the right track. Or, ooh, here's some things I didn't think of that I can go into 2025 and increase my financial wellness with.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. Thank you from Susan, and another thank you from Jenny. And yes, our pleasure. So
Thanks,
good to
you
have
guys.
you.
It's great to be with you.